So in some senses, when you're on your journey to have impact, I want you to remember to beware of assumptions. Everyone's going to want this. The amount of time I've seen a researcher say, we've invented this thing, everyone's going to want this. That's just never, ever, ever true. We have seen the enemy, and the enemy is us. The biggest enemy to our success of having impact is us. It's you. It's your assumptions that are unvalidated. So I want to talk a little bit about how does this normally work in research. So when we talk about research, often research starts with a problem. You've all sort of seen a problem at the start. So you've got this problem, and then at some point you've done a lit review, you've actually looked at the world and you've tried to think out, well, how can I solve this problem? So you've got an idea. So you start with a problem, you've got an idea. Sometimes you start with an idea and then you find a problem. That can happen as well. There's a lot of people doing that with AI at the moment. Here's this idea, here's AI. I wonder what problem I can solve with AI. And everyone's doing that. Students doing that every day, trying to work out how to use AI to do their studies. So either whether you start with a problem or an idea, it doesn't matter. What normally happens is you then do research. You're doing this in your PhD. You're doing some research to try and work out, is your understanding of the problem right, or is your idea going to work? And now you're running experiments over and over again. We're training you in the scientific method. And so you do this research, and that might end up in some sort of discovery or invention. Hopefully a good enough discovery so that you get a paper out of it. Maybe an invention if you're really lucky and clever and you end up with something you can patent. That's what often happens at university. That's sort of what research is you start with a hypothesis. This is the scientific method. Start with a hypothesis. I come up with an idea. I design an experiment to test if my understanding of if the idea is going to work or if the hypothesis is correct. I gather data. I collect that data. I analyze it. And then that helps me create a conclusion. And what that does is it often results in a publication. And this is the currency of universities. It's doing research, having a hypothesis, solving problems, doing research, and then publishing it. That's the publish sort of approach. And then sometimes, occasionally, someone thinks, well, I wonder what we can do with this idea, with this research, with this discovery, with this invention. And that's what my job was for 10 years, is trying to help researchers who invented something. And so that's what I did with Besh Bhandari, with the flowers, with Bioherbicides Australia. And so then you engage UniQuest, or you might start doing it yourself and trying to work out who cares and why. And unfortunately, 95% of the time, no one cares. They just don't care. And sometimes they might tell you, well, that was interesting. Interesting. If you ever hear the word interesting, interesting is akin to the kiss of death. Okay, interesting means I don't care. I just don't care. That's what interesting means. If someone says, bloody hell, I can't believe you can do that. How much money do you need? I want to get started tomorrow. That's what you're looking for. And that almost never happens. So we go this process and then no one cares. And so then we might publish why no one cares. And that goes into a review, a meta-analysis as to why all these things are doing. And when I started my work on Progel and Perky, I read all these lit reviews that people have done on microencapsulation. And I read about everyone in this thing and all these researchers who have done all this work. And what they said is the problem is everyone really desperately wants microencapsulation technologies. The problem is it's not cost effective. All the particles are either too big or they're too expensive. And so we had solved the problem. Besh had solved the problem that solved those problems. Exactly. We could make very small particles consistently at a really low cost. And so every paper had said it's impossible. The opportunity for microencapsulation is huge as long as we can make the particles small, consistent, and cheap. And that's exactly what our patent does. Small, consistent, and cheap. Nobody cared. Because they were all trying to explain why no one cared about their technology, and they said, oh, it's obviously too expensive. There was no evidence that that was true. And it wasn't true because we proved that we could solve that problem and still nobody cared. And so, but there's plenty of papers about that, particularly reviews. Now, occasionally someone cares. And I've been generous and said it's 5%. It's actually probably about 0.01%. Now, think of a university like University of Queensland. We have 3,500 academics. We have about a similar amount of PhD students, all collectively spending $1 billion a year on research. $1 billion just here, just at St. Lucia and Gatton and Hurston. And UniQuest, who does the commercialization on level 7 of this floor, they might get 2, 3, 4, 5 deals a year at best. And most of them aren't going to be successful. That's just people who actually have said that they care and they're going to give them a little bit of money. We get, in terms of pharmaceutical and therapeutics, we've had probably 2 or 3 over the last 40 years, 50 years. Gardasil, and the latest one, which is still not a product yet, called Vice Bio. So occasionally someone cares, and the university puts all their effort on trying to work with those people. The people who create something that no one cares about, there is no one to help you with that. That occasional thing creates impact at scale, which I think is about 0.01%. It's such a small fraction. And that's great. And someone gets a publication that way as well. So sort of the university doesn't mind, but it's pretty long process to actually just get a paper. So it's actually easier just to focus on that first bit. Let's just have ideas, let's do research, and let's publish. And the journals do this, they want to publish theories, they want to publish sort of, evidence about where things work. Because that process over there, you can do that in probably 6 months, maybe 12 months, might take you another year to get the paper. This process here will take 10 years. And so I guess the whole point here is if you want to get impact at scale, you should probably think about that at the start, not at the end. Because thinking about it at the end doesn't work. So why do research discoveries fail? Either A, because no one cares, B, because you're solving the wrong problem, C, you've got the wrong partner, you're working with the wrong people, D, no one knows you exist. I think that's actually the most common one, is that no one finds out about it. Like, we've got all these smart people. Like, we run workshops for academics about how to use LinkedIn. Like, they don't, and when they use LinkedIn, they don't actually really talk about their research, because who's going to understand, mitochondrial respiratory pathways, or the neural pathways of clownfish? Like, who actually is going to care about that? So no one knows you exist. Maybe it's just too early. It's just a really early discovery, and maybe it's too complicated. And at some point, some research will come up saying, look, universities need to really be focused on blue sky discovery research to work out how this world works. And I totally agree with that. I mean, E equals MC squared was really great. Newton's second and third or fourth law of thermodynamics, all those sort of things, they're really important. But at some point, someone had to work out, well, who cares? And turn those things into products and into services that actually make the world a better place. And sometimes it's just too complicated. It's a really easy idea. And you could argue that even our technology, which was really quite simple, we could build a machine that made microparticles for $10,000, but it was still another step that they didn't want to take. So the question I guess I'm asking you is, how do you solve the right unresolved problem? An unresolved problem. This is a big mistake people make, is they're solving a problem that's actually already been solved. And you think, well, I've got a unique angle on this, but ultimately the problem's already been solved. So you're looking to try and create impact, you're looking for unmet needs. So needs that people have that they're not happy with the current solutions. And what you're not looking for is unmet, unlikes, unwants, and unneeds. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of entrepreneurs do, what a lot of companies do. It's what a lot of researchers do. They're doing on something that they think people need, but they've never actually bothered to find out whether anyone really needs it, or whether they like it, or whether they want it. They haven't actually talked to them. They've read a lit review like I did about it. Everyone wants microencapsulated particles that are cheap and fast and small. But they haven't actually gone out and asked. I went out and asked, and they said, no, we don't care. And so we had to